All right, welcome to Steeler Country. I am Tony Serino. Today on the show, we are recapping the Steelers 2023 draft class, a class I think we were all probably going to be excited with no matter what happened, just because of how much draft capital this team had, right? They had, 4 picks in the top 100, 3 picks in the top 50. It's going to be hard to come out of that class not feeling pretty good about it. And yet I feel even better. In fact, we've all had 24 hours to sleep on it now. Had some time to digest it's almost 24 hours since the end of the draft. So try to avoid hyperbole, right? But I can't because I've been watching football since 1991, and I will tell you, this is the most excited I've ever been after a draft. Even I've seen the Steelers take multiple. I've seen them take Ben Roethlisberger. I watched them pick Kenny Pickett last year. This draft class is phenomenal. And here's how you know it's phenomenal. Take those top 4 picks, remove one of them. What grade would you give that draft, right? Take Joey Porter, Keanu Benton, Darnell Washington. Let's say that's who the Steelers got in this draft class. Those are the big names. They came away with Joey Porter, Keanu Benton, and Darnell Washington. Would you come away disappointed with that class? No, you wouldn't. You would come away pretty happy with that class. They got Broderick Jones too. I mean, by the way, they just happened to get a stud left tackle too, by the way. Incredible class. I know I haven't been on this channel for a while. Quite honestly, I'm planning on doing a draft recap, but we're doing AFC North talk tomorrow night. And by the way, shout out to anyone who joined us on Thursday. We did a live stream of the first round. So shout out to anyone who watched that. We're doing our draft recap on AFC North talk tomorrow. So you can join us over there. I was putting together my notes today, and I realized I could talk about this draft class for 30 minutes to an hour. I mean, if someone wants to just give me the floor and let me go for an hour tomorrow on the show, I could probably do that. But I probably shouldn't do that. So it's a roundtable show. So figured might as well spend some time here on the channel talking about this class in depth. I'll probably give on the show tomorrow a kind of a Cliff Notes version of what we'll talk about today on the show. But we got to start with not anyone that got picked. We got to talk about the con artist himself, Omar Khan, because shout out to this guy. I love the story of it. I love the idea of it. I love the idea that the guy who took over for Kevin Colbert didn't just, he's not going to get super conservative. It's not, let's just, a little here, a little there. This guy has been aggressive since day one. The moment he took over, let's get Larry Ogunjobi. Let's get Larry on the roster. Let's rebuild the entire edge rush position after training camp. The position sucks. Cool. Get rid of everybody. We'll rebuild the whole position. And he did that this offseason in free agency. Let's rebuild. Let's just rebuild the entire inside linebacker position. Lost Cam Sutton, bang. Let's rejuvenate the corner position. It's not like he's coming and we're going to tiptoe around because, hey, Kevin had a lot of good ideas. Don't want to rock the boat. Omar Khan's come in and said, no, we'll rock the boat. We'll rock the boat. And he comes out of this, like I said at the top, it was going to be hard for Omar Khan to come out of this class and not have fans feel like, boy, they did a good job. They got a bunch of talent. Because, again, when you have 3 picks in the top 50 of this class, and this is a pretty, this was a class that maybe didn't have a ton of top-end talent, but, you talk about, picks 20 through 50, a lot of good players in there. And so shout out to Omar. He got a little aggressive in the first round, right? Moving up in the draft. I think, there was only a couple times, 2-3 times in Kevin Colbert's time as a general manager that he ever moved up in the class. And the Omar Khan's first one, he said, "Now we're going up to get our guy." And then smartly is able to move down in the third round to accumulate the draft capital he lost. I mean, the guy went up from 17 to 14 in the first round, only gave up a 4th round pick, and they got that 4th round pick back in the third round by moving down and still getting their guy in the third round. So this is cloud nine. This is cloud nine for us Steeler fans. I'm not used to feeling this way after a draft, generally because Steelers don't have this much capital, right? They'll have their first, their second, their third. I mean, sometimes this team has traded away a third, like they did in the Devin Bush year, right, where they traded away that pick for the year prior, for the year after. But man, what a feeling it is today as a Steeler fan. So let's talk about the class as a whole, and I want to give you kind of general thoughts here as we go. But we'll start with what the Steelers did on Thursday night, selecting offensive tackle Broderick Jones from Georgia with the 14th overall pick. They made a trade with the New England Patriots to go up and get him. They had to move ahead of the Jets. This is after Darnell Wright had been selected by the Bears. Paris Johnson had been selected by the Cardinals, and Peter Skoronski had been selected by the Tennessee Titans. And so at this point in the draft, there was really only one tackle left that was worth taking. I mean, you could maybe convince yourself into a guy like Anton Harrison, and the Jaguars did that later on. But when you talked about the top tier tackles in this class, it was really Paris Johnson Jr., Darnell Wright, Broderick Jones, and then Peter Skoronski, to me, was the best tackle in this class. But obviously, with his arm length, there was a ton of question marks about whether or not a guy with such short arms, and again, 0 percentile arm length, 0 percentile. Never seen a tackle succeed with his arm length. There was questions about whether or not he was truly a tackle or a guard. Obviously, technically speaking, Skoronski is a fantastic player, but obviously size concerns come in. So if the Steelers were going to get a tackle, they were going to have to go up to get one, because likely one wasn't getting by the Jets at 15, who basically made it known, we are in the market for a tackle. We want the best one. Steelers make a move with the Patriots to go up and get Broderick Jones. Great pick. Great pick. Because here's the thing about Broderick Jones. I mean, and you probably read this, big and power. Is that the things that stand out about Broderick Jones on tape is that this is a mountain of a man. He's a powerful dude, and he wants to finish you, right? He's got the mentality that the Steelers are looking for, that punishing style that the Steelers want to run, that we saw them start to execute on late last season. One of the reasons why this team was 7-2 down the stretch is they started to move people on that line of scrimmage. Broderick Jones is a mover, no doubt about that. And he can move himself. He's very athletic as well. The thing about Broderick, though, that's interesting is that he's kind of getting away with it from an athleticism standpoint, right? Meaning that he's so athletic. I don't know that from a technical perspective, he's anywhere close to a finished product. And yet at Georgia, I mean, he was as productive as you could be at tackle. Gave up just 5 pressures a season ago, 0 sacks given up, and only had 2 penalties. So for a guy who, from a technical perspective, doesn't have a whole lot of, that he's working with. Exactly. I mean, he's just getting away with it on sheer athleticism and sheer power. There's a lot for Pat Meyer to work with here. I have loved this pick because if you listened to me a year ago, one of the reasons why I was big on Malik Willis and I was low on Kenny Pickett was that I said, look, you need to, when you're in this rebuild phase, when you're in this kind of transitory phase that the Steelers are in, but after Ben Roethlisberger era, that era is over. So you're closing that window, and now you're going to open a new one. Don't go with guys who have high floors and low ceilings. Get the guy who's got the high ceiling. Shoot for the moon. And that's what the Steelers have done here truly with Broderick Jones. Because look, is Broderick Jones a finished product today? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. But if Pat Meyer makes this work, if Pat Meyer can teach this kid hand usage, he can teach him to stop being such a leaner, or at least, bend this kind of waist bender. You'll want to use his head all the time. They can learn him to get that punch going. This kid's going to end up being a top 5 tackle, not just in this class, in the league. I mean, this guy has the kind of profile that if he rounds into form, is not just like Paris Johnson Jr. They drafted him, I think, starter for 10, 15 years, no doubt. I mean, he's just a solid left tackle for the next 10, 15 years. If Broderick Jones works out, if they make this thing work, that's a top 5 tackle. I mean, this is someone who loves to get to the second level, very easily gets to the second level. They were pulling him at Georgia, right? And again, as I talked about, just 5 pressures given up, 0 sacks. There's times when he loses on tape. It's not like this guy had clean tape at Georgia. There's some bad tape out there. Go and watch the Missouri game against Isaiah McGuire. Not great film for him, but he's able to make up for it with his athleticism. So again, just getting away with that at the SEC level, some of that will be translatable to the National Football League, because the SEC is probably as close as you're going to get to go up against truly NFL caliber DNs. But he's got a lot. This is not a finished product. In fact, I would argue, I said this on AFC North Talk on Draft Night. I'll say it again today. It's probably not a popular opinion, but I don't think it's a guarantee that Broderick Jones starts day one. Not a guarantee. Now, if you ask me, is it more probable? Yeah, I mean, I would say there's probably like a 60% chance Broderick Jones beats out Dan Moore. Dan Moore is not a great left tackle. So Broderick Jones probably should be beating him out. But again, Dan Moore has been a starter in this league for 2 years and understands what it takes to be a starter in this league. Broderick Jones has a lot to work on. I see a scenario where the Steelers don't feel comfortable with Broderick starting from week 1. I could see that. I think, again, I think it's a 60-40 that he starts. But given that he's got more to work with, I could see him not starting. But this is a long-term great pick. Again, this is not all about this class. What's great about this 2023 class is that this isn't just a class that's going to be good for the 2023 season. I mean, if this class works out, if Omar Khan got this right, and if Mike Tomlin and that coaching staff can round these guys all into shape, this is a great class for the next 10, 15 years for the Steelers. I mean, this is, I don't want to say Super Bowl, but if this class works out, Super Bowl. So I think Broderick Jones is a great pick, and it's a necessary one. Get yourself a stud left tackle in a division where you got Trey Hendrickson, you got Myles Garrett, and then Baltimore with their pass rush by committee thing that they love to do, right? Is it Ojabo? Is it Odafe Oweh? Who knows who their premier pass rush is going to be? But they always like to get after the quarterback. So get yourself a stud left tackle so Kenny can feel more sure of himself. Remember, Kenny's big thing last year was he couldn't make anything work in structure at the end of the year. I mean, everything Kenny wanted to do was like, let me get out of this pocket, let me escape, and go make something happen, right? That was where all the big plays happened at the end of last season. You think about the 2-minute drive against Baltimore. How many of those plays were in structure versus out of structure? I would argue every single play was out of structure, except the big throw to Steven Sims down the middle of the field. Every other one was Kenny trying to get out of there and make something happen. Some of it was Kenny's own doing, but some of that makes Kenny not feeling comfortable with the guys around him. He'll certainly be more comfortable once Broderick Jones rounds into shape. Great pick for the Steelers at 14. Sets them up with a potentially elite left tackle to go with all the rest of the things that Omar's done this offseason. When you talk about adding Isaac Stuamelo at guard, adding Nate Herbig. Nate is the one they already signed. Yeah, Nate Herbig, interior guy. Broderick might just come in year one and be a swing guy. They love the swing tackle. I mean, I'm not saying Broderick Jones won't compete and won't necessarily play week this season. I just think he may not start week one because there is some rounding out there to do. But certainly long term, awesome pick for the Steelers. And that took us to pick 32. Now they end up taking Joey Porter Jr., but let's take back the clock here, because you remember when the draft ended on Thursday night and we all saw Joey Porter Jr. was still available. It seemed so obvious that this was going to be the pick. But if you remember Omar Khan and Mike Tomlin's press conference, that, what was it, the one Tuesday, Wednesday before the draft, they made a big deal of saying, hey, we're open for business, baby. We could easily trade this pick. And I think they probably wanted to trade this pick, given that there's so much talent in this draft. I do think that they probably took a long, hard look at trading down and accumulating more assets. I mean, they would eventually trade down in the third round. But I think what the Steelers wanted here, if they were going to move down and essentially sacrifice taking Joey Porter Jr. here, I think they wanted another second or third round pick to do that. And when you look at the compensation that Arizona ended up getting for trading out of, what was it, the 33rd pick with Tennessee, I think they got a third round pick next year. That's decent value, but again, it's not in this class. And this is a good class to have second and third round picks, as we can see, given who the Steelers got in the second and third round. So the Steelers stay put. They don't trade out of that. They end up getting Joey Porter Jr. out of Penn State. Joey Porter Jr., by the way, was the most mocked player to the Steelers at 17, their original pick. So the fact that the Steelers ended up with a left tackle at pick number 14 in the first round, they stand pat at 32 and get the guy who, when we were going into the draft, there was like this debate of, do you take a left tackle or do you take Joey Porter Jr. at 17? Is it tackle or is it Joey Porter Jr.? What's it going to be? Because, if you don't get Joey Porter Jr. and you wait till 32, then you're talking about like the Tyreek Stevensons, the Cam Smiths, right? There's a tier 2 class of corner, not a bad class, but not really on that tier 1 level. We're talking about Devin and Christian Gonzalez and Joey Porter Jr. So the Steelers ending up with Joey Porter Jr. here is tremendous. And what he represents at the corner position shouldn't be undervalued here, right? I mean, obviously the name itself, it sells you as a Steeler fan. Joey Porter's kid. Okay, Joey Porter's kid plays corner, and of course all the mocks are not the comps for him are hilarious. I think it was PFF who wrote in their comp that Joey Porter Jr.'s comp is his father if he played corner. It's kind of true. I mean, he's a very physical player, very, very physical at the corner position. He's really a press man corner. That is what he excels in. Joey Porter Jr. has incredible wingspan, 97th percentile. 80 and 7/8 inch wingspan. And he knows how to use it. I mean, again, this is a guy who excels in press man coverage. You'll hear a lot of Steeler fans say, the naysayers will say, he's too grabby. His hand usage is really just kind of grabbing on and latching on to guys going to get called for PI at the next level. Something that's going to be true. I mean, I would say a lot of what I said about Broderick Jones, as far as, he doesn't really know what he's doing yet, or there's a lot for him to learn at the next level. I would probably say the same things about Joey Porter Jr. I mean, there's a lot for him to learn as far as his hand usage. He really has long arms and loves to press, and basically at the college level, because of that, because he was such a freak athlete, was able to get away with it. But there's a lot of meat left on this bone, certainly, even in press. Now, we talk about him playing an off or stuff like that. I think there's even more, because people will say he's stiff, and I don't know that he's necessarily stiff. When you watch him in press, I think he does a really good job in his transitions when he's in press. It's when he's not in press, when he's kind of off and he has to do the transitions, that's where it gets a little weird. But to me, I wonder, is that real stiffness, or is that just kind of a lack of comfortability with what he's doing, which kind of translates itself, when you're hesitant out there, you're not as fluid an athlete. That's kind of what I see at times with Joey Porter. But, at this, if he's going to start year one, they're going to play him in press, right off the top. And he is very good. He is very good in that way. And very productive too. One of the other criticisms I keep hearing about Joey Porter Jr. is that he's not productive at the college level. He's, especially the ball production. We thought it was ball production. Well, he had one interception in his college career. Okay, that's true. But much like when I talk about guys with sacks, edge rushers when it comes to sacks, you can't boil down a player like that. You can't boil down to everything that they do. They play hundreds of snaps a year. You can't boil it down to like 6 plays, right? Emmanuel Forbes, the most productive corner in this class, I think had 6 interceptions last year. You tell me he made an impact on 6 plays. Joey Porter made an impact on 0, and that's the reason why. This is our reason for why Joey Porter Jr. is not productive. You can't boil it down to that few number of plays. It's the same thing with sacks, right? TJ Watt is only impactful on the 16 sacks that he had. He's impactful on plenty of other plays, and I think that's where, when we're reductionists like that, I think it does a disservice to the player. So let me give you some numbers for Joey Porter Jr. and why I think productivity was not his problem. He was targeted last year in 22 just 30 times all season. 30 targets against Joey Porter Jr. in the 2022 season. He played every game. You compare that to Devin Witherspoon, who was taken 6th overall. You compare that to Christian Gonzalez, who was taken, 17th. You compare that to Emmanuel Forbes, who we just talked about, or you compare that to Deonte Banks. All of the players I just mentioned were targeted more than 60 times in 2022. Joey Porter Jr. targeted just 30. Teams in the Big Ten did not want to attack Joey Porter Jr. That was not on their radar. Going at JPJ? No. It was Porter Island, right? It was just like whoever's over there just not going his way. And by the way, to kind of put an emphasis on that, Joey Porter Jr. was targeted 30 times in 2022. 14 of those targets came in week 1 against Purdue. 14 of the 30 targets against Joey Porter Jr. came in week 1. Purdue came in and said, we're going to go after Porter Jr. We're coming after this kid. They targeted him 14 times. He gave up to 6 catches in that game, had 5 pass breakups, 7 forced incompletions, I believe. And then he was targeted 16 times the rest of the year. 16 times from week 2 to week, 14 weeks or whatever it is, 12 games. Incredible. I mean, they just did not want to go his way. So, yeah, he didn't have a ton of interceptions last year. He also didn't get targeted a whole lot. He won Defensive Player of the Week in the nation for that performance against Purdue. And then, teams just stopped going his way. So I would argue that productivity is not necessarily a downside of the Joey Porter Jr. pick. I would argue that productivity is one of his best assets. Teams just did not want to, they did not want to go his way. And when you look at his profile, a guy who wants to get up and be physical, that's his game. And you think about who the Steelers are going up against in the AFC North. The old adage is, right, win your division first. You got to win your division first. Who are the wide receivers the Steelers have to go up against on a week-to-week basis? Jamar Chase T. Higgins, Amari Cooper. And those three guys right there, Baltimore's got some dudes, but they're all unproven. I'm talking about the guys who are actually good. Sorry, Baltimore. But you think about those three guys right there. Think about that second game against Cincinnati last year. Ja'Marr Chase didn't play in that game. It was T. Higgins only. Go look at T. Higgins' stat line in that game. In fact, you probably don't even need to because we all remember it, right? T. Higgins was a man amongst boys in that game. I mean, he made the Steelers secondary look silly. The Steelers had no answer, whether it was Cam Sutton, Levi Wallace, Arthur Millette in the slot, nothing. I mean, the Steelers had no answer for T. Higgins in that game. It's why the Steelers gave up 37 in that game. They just had no answer for that. He bodied. I mean, T. Higgins bodied every corner the Steelers threw at him. And the same for Amari. Go back to week 2 against the Cleveland Browns. Oh, no, it was week 3, the Thursday game. Same thing, Amari Cooper in that game. Man amongst boys. And that one was really Ahkello Witherspoon, but Ahkello Witherspoon could not stay with Amari. Could not stay with Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper, a bigger physical receiver, Witherspoon could not stay with him. Joey Porter Jr., look, he's got some things to work on. I'm not saying that he's going to shut down T. Higgins or he's going to shut down Amari Cooper, but he has the physical makeup of the kind of player who is not going to let that happen. If Joey Porter Jr. rounds into shape, much like Broderick Jones, this is a shutdown type guy, especially against the bigger, more physical receivers. Now, can he stay with the guys like Rashad Bateman, who are probably more technical route runners, a guy like Zay Flowers, who's more of a speedster? That remains to be seen. That's something that he's going to have to work on in his game. But when we're talking about bigger physical players, Joey Porter Jr.'s game matches up really well if he develops, matches up really well against guys like Chase, Higgins, and Cooper. And I think that's what drew the Steelers to that pick. So an incredible value to get this guy at 32. And by the way, I've been going for 20 minutes already. Like I said, this is why I needed to do it today. This is why I needed to do this today on this channel, because on AFC North Talk, I could talk for an hour, and I'm probably going to talk for an hour today. All right, that takes us to the 40. No, it was the 49th overall pick. Did I have this wrong? I think it was the 49th overall pick, not 46. That's a typo. But it doesn't matter. The Steelers got interior defensive lineman, nose tackle, Keanu Benton from Wisconsin. Mark it down. The Steelers got another defender from Wisconsin. They love to do that. That's just it's an easy comp for them. You look at TJ Watt, Wisconsin defender, Isaiah Loudermilk, Wisconsin defender, and then 2 in this class. We'll talk about Nick Herbig a little later. But the thing about Wisconsin is they run that odd front. So especially for D linemen, it becomes easy, and edge rushers too. It becomes easy, an easy comp from, can he do the things we're going to ask him to do mentally? Does he understand the concepts here? He very clearly does, because he played in that in college. With Benton, I think you're getting someone who is really, really strong. This is a guy who has powerful hands. You see that a lot on tape. He's another guy, though, who, once again, I just think there's so much meat on this bone. I think he comes in right away and he can be a good run defender. I do worry, he puts a lot of good tape out there from his pass rush, but I just worry with how upright he is. I just don't know that stuff's going to necessarily translate as much as he's a really strong guy. I think he'll be able to hold up the point of attack. I don't know that. I know if you read all the kind of analysis of Keanu Benton, it's he's going to have to develop his run game. I think his strength, he'll be fine. He is a little too upright. There's no doubt about that. He is too upright, and that may hurt him. But I think you can kind of plug and play him as a run defender and work on him as a pass rusher long term. But one of his key moves is that kind of single long arm, right? Keeping that old lineman off you. Very Cam Hayward on tape. I'm not trying to say he's the next Cam Hayward. I'm saying when you watch him on tape, oh, hey, I know that move. That's Cam's signature move. But this is another guy who, if he works out, right? This is the next Steeler D lineman. Cam is going to retire within the next, I don't know how long. Let's say 5 years. But Keanu Benton, if he fills out, he's got a supreme athleticism. There's no doubting that. He's very, very strong. He needs to learn the technical aspects of defensive line play. I remember talking to Stephon Tuitt back in 2019 at training camp. He talked so much about hand usage and understanding how to use your hands. Something that I think Benton needs to learn. I think Benton needs to also learn that low man wins in a lot of these cases, so he's got to stay low. Once again, another guy who's kind of getting away with it from an athleticism perspective. But this is very much a theme of the class, which is Omar Khan taking potentially great players and telling Mike Tomlin and that coaching staff, look, you guys got to develop these guys. I'm shooting for the stars here. Like, we're trying to hit a bunch of home runs. We're not trying to get on base. There's no singles in this class. Well, there's probably one. There's probably one where they did hit a single, but also could be a home run. It could be let's say an infield homer, I guess you would say. But no, I think with Benton, if he works out, this is on Carl Dunbar, this is on Terrell Austin, this is on the coaching staff. Round this kid into form, and he's the next great Steeler D lineman. He's got that pedigree, that caliber. This is another player that was mocked to the Steelers a ton, and they went out and got him. And that takes us to pick number 93. I love this pick so much. I'm not going to lie to you. Was I running around screaming in my living room like the Steelers scored a touchdown after they picked Darnell Washington? Yes, I was. I can't believe they got Darnell Washington, especially in the third round. I mean, once again, this is another player. You talk about Broderick Jones, would have been, again, everyone's happy with that pick. No one's going to sit here today and say Broderick Jones is a bad pick. Joey Porter Jr., you would have been happy with him at 17. You're ecstatic with him at 32. Darnell Washington, I would have been okay with him at 17, quite honestly. And I would have been ecstatic to get him at 32. To get him at 93, I mean, there's no words. There are absolutely no words for the fact that the Steelers were able to steal Darnell Washington in the third round. I understand their health concerns that likely led to him falling to this point. I get that. I'm not a doctor. I haven't seen his medicals. What I have seen is his tape. And his tape is phenomenal. His tape, it so matches what the Steelers want to do. What gets me excited about this is not just the player. It's what it represents for the Steelers as far as what they want to be offensively. You think about why the Steelers were successful at the end of 2022. Why were they 7-2 down the stretch? They ran a ton of 12. They ran the ball down people's throats. They were very, very efficient offensively. They weren't explosive offensively. They didn't put up a ton of points offensively, but they consistently were able to move the ball. And it was the first time we've really seen them be able to run that style of offense since they've kind of gone into this mode. I mean, if you imagine that in the post-Killer B era, this team kind of was without an identity, right? They went from the Killer B era to we really don't know what we want to be. That was like the Randy Fichtner era. Then the beginning of the Matt Canada era, it was like, I'm not really sure what this team is trying to be. They drafted Najee Harris. So you thought, well, do they want to be more of a ground and pound style of team? But man, that offensive line sucks. Like they're going through this entire offensive line transition. They didn't, they added in that draft class Dan Moore and Kendrick Green. Kendrick Green was an out-and-out disaster. And Dan Moore, for a fourth-round rookie left tackle, I mean, wasn't an out-and-out disaster, but still, right? It was like this identity crisis that the Steelers were that the Steelers had offensively. And then at the end of last season, it really started to round itself into shape. You're starting to see, oh, okay, this is what they could be. This is what it could look like if the Steelers are effective. Obviously, they have to score more touchdowns. I mean, their red zone offense was atrocious. But that's what the Steelers could be. 12 personnel, run, efficient on third down. And you saw that be successful at the end of last season. And so when you talk about adding Darnell Washington to the fold now, you think about already having a guy like Pat Freiermuth who has established himself as a very good receiving option in this offense. Maybe not a great blocker, but someone who built a real rapport with Kenny Pickett at the end of last season, especially in those ad-lib moments. Now you add Darnell Washington to the mix, this is a guy who's 6'7", 270. If you haven't watched his tape, go on YouTube when you're done here. You're already on YouTube. So stay here when we're done and go Google Darnell or search for Darnell Washington highlights and be amazed. I mean, this guy is they just don't, they don't make 6'7", 270 players who move like Darnell Washington moves. It's incredible to watch. And he put, you go on his Instagram profile right now, it says 6th offensive lineman. That's what he calls himself. 6th offensive lineman. And this is a guy who takes real pleasure in being a very good blocker. Or at least a willing blocker. I mean, again, I think there's room for him to grow as a blocker. But you talk about his 6'7", 270 frame. I mean, and his willingness, he'll get there. I don't doubt that he's going to get there. So what this represents for the Steelers offense to me is that they are all in on, and I think it was Matt Canada who said this after they drafted Darnell Washington, right? He said, look, it's no secret what we want to be offensively. We're the Zag team now. In a league where it is all about how much firepower can you put together, right? We're all going to score 30. It's going to be like we're basically setting up a league where everybody wants to be 30 points a game, right? We got the Migos over in Cincinnati, and Pat Mahomes, Andy Reid, and whatever they want to do at receiver, they can do because they just make it work over there. But you look at the Jets adding Aaron Rodgers, right? You look at the Browns adding Elijah Moore and adding another receiver in this class. You look at the Ravens entering into the mix by adding Odell and Zay Flowers in this draft class. Last year, you had the Raiders adding Devonta Adams, right? Everyone wants to kind of enter into this arms race of we're going to outscore everybody, right? We're just going to be an offensive juggernaut. And what's the best offensive juggernaut we can put together for these kind of high-flying pass-first offenses? And the Steelers have said, yeah, we opt out. Yeah, we opt out of that. No. We're not going to be that. We're going to turn the clock back to like 1994, or really, go back to like 1974. And we're going to line up with two tight ends, and we are going to jam the ball down your throat until you can stop it. And if you do, we'll convert. We'll run some play action. That's what we're going to do. We're going to make the game real dirty, real grimy. You want to live in this, like, we're going to go on 4-play drives, right down the field, bing, bang, boom. You're like, no, you're not going to have the ball because we're going to have the ball for like 37 minutes this game. I mean, go back and watch Steelers at the end of last year. That's what they were doing. And they had kind of, again, I don't want to say they perfected it, but they were getting there. I mean, that was okay. This offense could eventually be really good if they could score touchdowns in the red zone. So Darnell represents like an all-in approach to that. Now we have a tight end who you can put in with Gentry, instead of Gentry, I should say, with Muth, who this is a capable and willing blocker, but is also a really dangerous receiving threat. Again, 6'7", 270. He's not a super polished route runner right now. His best work comes in play action. But you get this guy out in space. The thing that stands out to me about Darnell, this guy had more yards after catch on a per catch basis than any tight end taken before him in this class. And this was a really good tight end class. Michael Mayer, Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, Luke Musgrave, yada, yada. The list goes on and on. So how many tight ends were taken before Darnell? There's probably like 7. None of them had as much yak as Darnell Washington. Because you get this guy out in open space with the ball, I got to tell you, safeties and corners weren't flying down to take him out. There weren't a lot of guys like, yeah, let me go take on 6'7", 270 guy with a full head of steam. This guy averaged almost 7.6 yards per reception of yak. So again, this is another one where if he rounds out as a receiver, he's so dangerous. I mean, again, so dangerous. People have written a lot this week about Matt Canada better not screw this up. It's been like this. I think Caboli wrote it up for The Athletic yesterday, where he said there's no more excuses for Matt Canada. This is it. Like and I agree with the sentiment, although I will say, as I've been saying this whole show, I'm not 100% convinced that all these guys start right away. I mean, again, I think this is a great draft for the Steelers in the long term. But the Steelers didn't go out and hit a bunch of singles. This isn't like, they got Skoronski, who, if he's not a tackle, he's a great guard, right? I mean, again, it's not a home run pick, but it's a solid single double type player where you just are going to count on him forever. Well, they went and got Broderick Jones, who a lot of problems with his tape, but if he works out, he's a top 5 tackle in the league. Not necessarily going to start right away, though. Joey Porter Jr., same thing, right? If they didn't go out and get a guy, I was like, well, yeah, he's just a safe, solid pick. I was like, this guy is a press man machine and will shut you down. Will shut down his side of the field if he figures it out. And they got Darnell Washington, who, again, if this guy works out, this is an unbelievable steal to get what should have been a first or early second round pick. They got this guy near to the end of the 3rd round. And they were able to trade down, accumulate the 4th round pick, and get this guy still. And he's the perfect it is the kind of the cherry on top of this offense. That's why I think people have written that idea of like Matt Canada, you better not screw it up now, is because Darnell Washington is like, boop, and we put the cherry on top. We have an unbelievable 12 personnel tight end now. And now you can do things like you can come out in 12. You're basically putting Darnell and Pat out there, and you're telling defenses, are you coming out in base or are you going to come out in nickel? You're going to come out in base? Because we'll put Pat out in the slot, by the way. We're not afraid to do that. You want to put a linebacker on Pat straight up out in the slot? Cool. We want you to do that too. And if you're going to come out in nickel and you're going to take a D lineman out, well, we're just going to pound the ball down your throat. And again, this is why it's like, yeah, Matt Canada, you can't screw this up now. And Darnell, by the way, is the one guy out of these first four who I think he will play. He will play. There's no doubt. He's too good a blocker. He will play. Now, obviously, the knee, foot concerns. Again, I'm not a doctor. I will say this. The Steelers had him in for a visit very late in the process. You have to imagine their doctors took a look at whatever it is, knee, foot, whatever it is. They were comfortable enough to take it. That's good enough for me. Again, I'm not, people will poo-poo this pick years from now because like, oh, he got hurt all the time. It's like, okay, but I didn't know that. I love the pick because I'm not a doctor. All right. That takes us to round number 4. This is the pick the Steelers got for trading down, but still getting Darnell Washington. They got an edge rusher here. Nick, is it Nick or Nate? I think it's Nick, right? Nate's the one they signed and Nick's the one they drafted. Whatever. It might be Nate. Who knows? They got brothers on the team again. So this is one that was, again, like just mocked to the Steelers all the time. It's so obvious. They did get the edge rusher from Wisconsin. Now, a lot of draft analysts, in fact, I think maybe every single one. I'm not sure that there's a single outlet out there that didn't list Nick Herbig as a linebacker and not an edge rusher. Because I think the assumption coming in is this guy's too small to play edge. He can't play edge. He just can't play edge. You can put him at linebacker, and he's got a lot of good instincts. Right? They asked, again, going from that Wisconsin system, odd front. So they're asking him to drop back into coverage a lot. So you're getting to see a lot of that. You're getting a lot of see like his, eyes on the quarterback type of thing. Can he play in space? Very translatable to the linebacker position. That's why I think a lot of people said, well, short arms, smaller guy. Is he going to play? Is he going to play it at this weight at edge? Probably not. So they kick him inside the linebacker and he'll be fine. And then Denzel Martin, the Steelers assistant coach, went into that press conference and was asked right off the top, do you see him more as an edge or a linebacker? And they said, no. We're going to start him at edge. Now, that's interesting because he's small. He's super small for an edge. You think about like an edge rush, if he's going to be the first guy off the bench, and right now it's either going to be him or what? Quincy Roche. Although, if I keep doing videos on this channel, and I'll try, we'll see, time permitting, we should talk about what this team's plan is for DeMarvin Leal. Because I'm not so sure that DeMarvin Leal isn't like this like hybrid edge-ish type player. You've heard Tomlin talk about this in a press conference. I think it was the pre-draft when he talked about how he sees more specialization in the league. This is not about finding these kind of do-it-all type players. It's about a very specific thing that I need for this moment, which is interesting. Because I wouldn't put Nick Herbig out there as an edge rusher on an obvious running down. What is he, like 240? This guy's going to get run over. This guy's not going to be a good run defender. He's not going to set the edge for you at his size. But can he get to the quarterback? I mean, he had the most sacks in the Big Ten last year. Now, it's not always a great, as I said, just said this earlier, don't always go by sacks. I do think he has a decent amount of pass rush moves. He's got some inside counters to go with his kind of speed rush. Again, this is another one, by the way. Just assume that every Steeler pick that they got was a superior athlete. I mean, you go to their relative athletic scores, the Ken Lee Platt thing. I think everyone in the class was 7.5 or higher in the relative athletic score. So Nick Herbig, superior athlete. And there's enough to work with as a pass rusher here. But again, it's like, I believe he has shorter arms and he's smaller. So not exactly a great comparison. And by the way, I did see this on Twitter the other day where people were saying like, look, Nick's too small to play edge. And someone said, no, that's what they said about James Harrison. James Harrison's too small. And Ryan Clark came in and was like, okay, small is not how you would describe James Harrison. James Harrison was not a small man. James Harrison had short arms. That's it. He was not small. He was, from a height perspective, he was short and he had short arms, but he was about as built as you could possibly be. I would not describe Nick Herbig in that way. So that's gonna be the challenge here. I do think at a minimum with this pick, if they can't make it work at edge, you will just kick him inside and he'll be okay at linebacker. I think at the end of the day, you'll kick him inside. He'll be a linebacker. I'm interested to see how this works. Again, I'm interested to see what they do at the third edge rush position. Because right now it's Quincy Roche, it's Nick Herbig, and it's whatever they're going to do with DeMarvin Leal. And I'm not sure what else. It's probably room to add another one. Because again, I'm not sold that Nick Herbig is a plug and play guy. I think there's real questions about that pick. So we'll see. All right, that takes us into the kind of what did everybody do during the fifth and sixth round lull that we got? It was quite a lull. It was like 2 hours between Steeler picks. They got Nick, and we're all like on this high, and they got to wait. And you know what? I'll tell you what, the Steelers did well for themselves because that wait paid off. They ended up getting Corey Trice out of Purdue. Now, I'm not going to sit here and act like I watched a bunch of Corey Trice tape before the draft. I did not. But what I have gleaned is that this guy's a top 100 player on a lot of people's boards. He has some real medical concerns. I guess he tore his ACL, a season ago, and he's got a ton of medical concerns with that knee, which took him off of a lot of boards. In fact, Jim Nagy, the guy who runs the Senior Bowl, was saying Trice didn't get a Senior Bowl invite, didn't even give him an invite to the Senior Bowl because he had heard from NFL teams that, no, we're not, this guy's not draftable considering what's wrong with his knee. So that's an interesting, that's interesting that most teams seem like this guy just wasn't on their board. That's why he's available in the 7th round, considering the caliber of play, right? Because again, the film reviewer guys, all the analysts you would trust had him as a top 100-ish player. He ends up falling to in the 200s. Clearly, there's a big problem with the medicals there, and a lot of teams likely had him off the board. The Steelers did not. He is a press man corner, though. This is another one, much like Joey Porter Jr., very much going to be a in-your-face press man corner. You wonder if, once again, in the spirit of zagging when everyone else is zigging, right? Be the zag team defensively. We live in a too-high world in the National Football League. We live in a world where too-high safeties are all the rage. Remember the Bengals? Can the Bengals beat cover 2? Can the Bengals do anything against cover 2? Why is it so hard for the Bengals to move the line? And that was a whole, and it was the Bengals were like on the cover of that book, but that book was deep. And there were a lot of offenses last year, especially the beginning parts of last season, that struggled against those cover 2 looks. You don't play press man in cover 2. I'm just going to tell you that right now. It's not exactly how you run cover 2. You're going to run probably more man or man-ish, like cover 3 type stuff, single high safeties. It's interesting, right? And again, in a league that's transitioning to too high, Steelers like, nope. Oh, we're going to go like, pass happy league of just bombs away offense. No, we're going to run the ball. We're going to run the ball down your friggin' throat. And on defense, we are going to get up in your receiver's face, and we're going to get after the quarterback. Again, look, does this work? Does this work in the modern NFL? Does this mean that the Steelers, can the Zag team win a Super Bowl? I don't know. But I do like the idea that this team has an identity again. I know what I'm supposed to be watching for, right? I know what this team is supposed to look like when they're good. When it was the post-Killer Bee era, right? When you had that year where Le'Veon sat out the year, what was that team? What was their identity? What did they do? And really, what have they done since then? What has been their identities from that point? Because today, from defensively, get after the quarterback. Rush is Greg Lloyd. Rush the quarterback. That's what they were defensively, and they were a turnover machine. I get defensively they had an identity. Offensively, what would you say we've done for the last couple of years? Play like shit and then survive till the end. That's basically been the Steelers' identity for the last 3 years. Right? Play like shit, but then at the end, we'll just make something happen. Now it's no, we're going to ground and pound. And obviously defensively, Corey Trice is going to be one of those press man type corners if he works out. Now I will say this about this class, because we're almost done here. We got one more pick. Spencer Anderson, who, let's be honest, no one knows anything about Spencer Anderson, all right? He's a very athletic player. He can play guard. I guess he can play center as well. Interior type guy. 7th round pick. I don't know a whole lot about him. That's all I got. But I will say this about the class. So that was it. One thing the Steelers did not do in the entire class, they did not add a nickel. They did not add a slot corner. Now, again, as I talked about, arms race. Everybody wants to run 11 personnel. right? We're going to spread you out. This is what everybody does. You know, the whole sub package is the new base package type stuff. Okay, but who exactly is going to play slot for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Because if it's Arthur Maulet, how many of you in chat are excited today to watch Arthur Maulet start 16 games at slot corner for the Steelers this year? Is there anyone? Do I have any takers on that one? Because I am not. Now the Steelers have added some pieces this offseason. And they still look, Trey Norwood still exists as a player. He was given an opportunity to play some slot. They just signed this guy from Minnesota, although Minnesota was like the worst pass defense in the league last year. So, you know, I know they got Patrick Peterson from Minnesota. Now, Patrick Peterson actually did have a good year last year, besides the fact that he was on a otherwise terrible defense. But it's Omar, gonna need you to cook one more time. Gonna need you to get a slot corner. There were opportunities in this class for them to get one, but the problem was, the Steelers kind of went with, let's call it chalky picks for throughout the entire draft, right? I mean, no one's gonna sit here today and complain about Broderick Jones. No one's gonna sit here today and complain about Joey Porter Jr. Like, I would have liked to have Brian Branch in one of those picks because that would have solved the problem. But would I rather have Brian Branch than Joey Porter Jr.? Probably not. Joey Porter Jr., again, the Steelers don't have a good outside corner long-term right now, period. And you need outside corners more than you need a slot corner. You can find slot corners. Can you find good quality outside corners? I mean, the fact that even a Steeler fan is the fact that I'm even going down this path when we have seen for freaking years in Pittsburgh a dearth of good outside corners. I mean, we could name on one hand right now the amount of good quality starting outside caliber corners the Steelers have had in the last 20 years. You want to go over the list? Rod Woodson, Ike Taylor, Joe Hayden. Are we done? We got more? Maybe you'll add Cam Sutton, although, I mean, Cam was probably more of a better slot. I mean, he played pretty good outside last year, but that was one good year of outside corner. Who else? Did I miss anybody? That's in the last 20 years. And by the way, Rod Woodson didn't play for the Steelers in the last 20 years. So that comes out. And by the way, there's only two. Because Joe Hayden and Ike Taylor. That's the list. So yeah, would I take Brian Branch over Joey Porter Jr.? Nope. And then same thing, Keanu Benton. Would I rather have Keanu Benton or Joey Porter or Brian Branch? And then Brian Branch was off the board by the time they took Darnell Washington, right? So that was it. That was their only opportunity. There was the Clark Phillips of the world or whatever. We'll see what Omar Khan does at nickel. It's the one position on the roster right now where I really don't feel good. Third edge rusher, I probably also don't feel super excited about because I think there are big question marks about Nick. But Nick's got some pedigree. Again, Nick can move into inside linebacker. I just don't know what the Steelers are going to do at that third edge rush position long term. But we're only in May, so we still have 2.5 months till training camp starts. We've seen in the past, last year, the Steelers had Larry Ogunjobi. We were looking at the Steelers defensive line, going, "Whoa, who's going to start here?" Right? And we're seriously going to talk about Isaiah Loudermilk starting, and then it ended up being that they signed Larry Ogunjobi. So that very easily could be in the cards. All right, that takes us through my evaluation. By the way, if I had to give this class a grade, I would give it an A+++++++ would draft from again. And that is an eBay joke for those of you who remember eBay back in the day. All right, let's scroll back up. Let's see. A lot of people excited that I'm back doing stuff on the channel. I'm like I said, I had to do something here because I can't talk for this long on AFC North talk, right? I mean, if Sonny wants me to talk for an hour tomorrow, I will talk for an hour, as I've done here. But I just felt like I got to get this out of my system. So here we are. Ali says about the Broderick Jones pick, love the pick. Aggressive. It was a little aggressive. It wasn't super aggressive. It wasn't like the Steelers moved to 8 or 9 like had been the rumor. I think it was the Bootleg podcast with Brian Coleman. His co-host there said that he knew for a fact the Steelers had talked to both the Falcons and Bears about moving up to potentially get a tackle. So that was in the cards. Going up that high, though, would have meant the Steelers likely had to get rid of a second-round pick. Maybe too aggressive, right? So the fact the Steelers were, I think Wexel wrote this today, wasn't so, this was aggressive. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say Omar Khan was not aggressive in this class. He was. The caliber of player that he picked was aggressive. As I talked about, he was not batting for singles. This was not a get on base type of draft. This was not like, let me just take some safe picks who maybe don't have like this high upside, but I'm not going to screw this draft up. Like, we may look at this class 5 years from now and say, like, man, all these guys didn't work out. Because again, there's all these guys have real things that they need to work on. But I love the aggression. I love the idea that if this draft does work out, this is a goodbye, camera. This is a monster class. Come on, camera. What are we doing? So I mean, aggressive to go up and get that, to move up in the draft. Kevin Colbert only did it like 2 or 3 times in his entire career. Mr. Wire says Jones and Washington are maulers. Yes, they. You know what? I mean, who would you not say is a mauler in this class? Right? I mean, you think about Broderick Jones and Darnell Washington as blockers, they are maulers, no doubt. But I mean, would you describe Joey Porter Jr. as a corner as a mauler? Because I would. You watch his tape, he's a mauler. He wants to get out. We're right here, right? Actually, he's got long arms. So he could be back here, but still, he's all up in. I would say he's a mauler. Keanu Benton, mauler. I think that was Corey Trice. Steelers want to be a physical football team. Again, they want to zag. We're going to go in this finesse league. We're going to play a lot of cover 2. We're going to just make you beat us down the field. Like, Steelers like, no, we're going to be in your face. We are going to punch you in the mouth, and we're going to see how you react. Yeah, I love this class. Devin here. Tony, I feel like this is a year where most fans of all teams are happy with the draft. Is it just that time of year, or do you think teams really get the players that fit what they wanted? I do think this was a really good class from like round 2 through 5. So I think that's why most teams are going to feel happy, because this is a really deep class. Again, there weren't a lot of like top end guys, but that's why I think you're going to come out of a class feeling good about that. If you got a lot of those, like the Steelers did, the Steelers got, four picks in the top 100. And that, I mean, arguably they got 4 of the best top 50 players in this class. No doubt in my mind about that. So we talk about the rest of the division, because I think Devin, you're a Ravens fan, right? Because I remember you from AFC North Talk. I think the Ravens, filled some needs in this class. Certainly a guy like Zay Flowers, and we'll talk about this tomorrow on AFC North Talk, but spoilers for what I'll say on that channel, right? Zay is a much more interesting player today than he would have been like 2 or 3 years ago, right? The fact that he's playing in a Todd Monken offense means that they may actually use some of what makes him a good player, right? I mean, his elusiveness and his aggression. Whereas in Greg Roman's offense, he would have been wasted. So, I think the Bengals, to me, probably had Bengals and Browns. I mean, the Browns didn't have a first, second round pick, so it's hard to say they had the worst draft. They just had the least capital. What they did with that capital, I don't love Siaki Ika. Cedric Tillman's the better of the 2 Tennessee players, although his skill set is so similar to Amari Cooper. It's like, what are we doing there? I know they wanted Hyatt because they want more of a speedster. They wanted Marvin Mims. The Bengals, I'm not like super in love with that class, although I think directionally it was probably correct in that they understand how their bread is buttered. Right? I mean, I know that we think about the Bengals as being this high, one of those high flying teams, but they've won all their games in the playoffs on defense. I mean, you think about what they did in that game in Baltimore, or against Baltimore, and they won that game because they forced a fumble and ran it back for a touchdown. I mean, they got 7. I mean, they got 7 points of that, and it won them the game. They won that game against Buffalo because they destroyed the line of scrimmage. And they were in that game against Kansas City because at the end of the game, Kansas City couldn't score. I don't think they've never put 30 points up in a playoff game, right? That's still the case. In fact, I think they probably average closer to 20 than they do 30. Do they average 25 plus points per game in the playoffs? They don't. They are a defense team when it gets to that time of year. And I think they understand that about themselves, right? I mean, it's kind of that self-awareness. We need to be good defensively. And they went pretty heavy defense in the class. Father Dismas says, feeling good about this year. I am too, but I will tell you this. Again, it's kind of been the theme of today's show. I don't think that this is just a class that makes 2023 better, right? And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if this class doesn't affect 2023 a whole lot. I wouldn't be surprised if this class, if some of this class doesn't play a whole lot, right? Just Joey Porter Jr., we guaranteed he starts over Levi Wallace. You would hope he starts right away, right? I mean, if he starts right away over Levi, that's really good things for his future, but I'm not going to guarantee that. Same thing, I'm not going to guarantee that Broderick Jones. I think it's more likely that he does, but maybe he doesn't because he's got a lot of things to clean up. Benton is probably going to be like a 2-down type player. Darnell, I think, will play in their 12 personnel. Herbig, I hope, can make an impact as a third edge rusher, right? But again, all those guys I talked about, Benton, I think, is much more, 2-3 years from now, right? Say all these guys, Broderick Jones, Joey Porter Jr., Benton, right? These are guys who, like, 3 years from now, with 3 years from now, we could be talking about Broderick Jones as being a top 5 tackle if the coaching staff makes it work. We could be talking about Joey Porter Island if they make that work. We're talking about Keanu Benton as the next great Steeler defensive lineman if they make that work. These are not things that I think we're going to be saying in 2023. We will not be saying it's Joey Porter Island in 23. We will not be saying it's Broderick Jones is a top 5 tackle in 23. These are things that are going to take time. I still feel good about the year, by the way. Again, I think when you look at the free agency class the Steelers brought in, that's why I feel good. Ali says, I think they want to trade 32 for a crazy price. Yep. Yep. They wanted 2 seconds or a second and a third or something like that. They were asking for something crazy. They didn't get it, and they end up with a great player anyway, right? I mean, can't argue with that. Mr. Wires again here says Tony wins the post-draft AFC North talk. It is tomorrow night, 5 p.m. 5 p.m. tomorrow night. Be there. I'll be there. We're going to talk about this Steeler class and all the other classes in the AFC North. The Steelers got an A plus class, so I'm very excited to see how my co-host downplay this class because the Steelers are far and away the best class of the division. But we'll see what my co-hosts have to say. I'm looking forward to it. Ali says, glad we didn't get Gonzalez. Tomlin thinks he's soft, not enough bark. Yeah, how about that? By the way, shout out to Steelers DB. If you're not following Steelers DB on Twitter, he's just an awesome analyst. And he's also a bit of a reporter now. He's breaking scoops. Good for him, man. That's awesome. Derek's great. He broke the scoop that on that visit, someone overheard Minkah talking to Tomlin after that visit, and Tomlin saying he didn't have the personality. He didn't like him. Didn't think he had that dog in him. And that's why they passed on Gonzalez. Mark here says Porter got burnt by Marvin Harrison Jr. Well, I mean, they shouldn't draft him then. Yeah, I mean, if Marvin Harrison Jr., here's how good Marvin Harrison Jr. is. I saw a mock draft. It's way too early mock season. We're going to do this. Like these mocks are all going to be wrong. But here's how good Marvin Harrison Jr. is. Next year, Caleb Williams is going to come out and be a generational type player. He's again going to get talked about as like the Burrow, Andrew Luck, right? I mean, it's like, oh my God, this is the greatest prospect of all time. That's what Caleb is going to be next year, unless size concerns do him in. But Caleb Williams is a fantastic quarterback out of USC, going to be the number 1 overall pick. Unless you believe one of the mocks I read today, I think it was PFN, who had Marvin Harrison Jr. number 1 overall, above Caleb Williams. That's how good Marvin Harrison is as a wide receiver. The fact that Joey Porter got a little beat up by Marvin Harrison, don't bother me that much. Marvin Harrison is a generational wide receiver. Absolutely. I mean, and a tactician as a wide receiver. As I talked about, I'm interested to see how Joey Porter matches up against the real tacticians of the league, like the Stephon Diggs of the world, or even in the division, right? I mean, the best example of this is Rashad Bateman. These real tactician of route runners, not someone who's going to beat you with their speed over the top, not someone who's going to beat you with their physicality, someone who's really going to kind of get in your head, and kind of, break your ankles for the lack of a better term. That's more what Marvin Harrison is. I'm interested to see what Joey Porter does at the next level. That's where I think he does need to be better. Wire says, I like the Trice pick a lot. It really comes down to medicals for him. It really comes down to medicals because the tape tells you that this is a top player. When you hear Matt Nagy say that he didn't get invited to the Senior Bowl because so many teams told him not getting drafted, that's where you do have to be a little bit concerned. Although, and the Steelers, by the way, waited till the 7th. I mean, it's not like the Steelers, like with Darnell, they took him in the 3rd round. They're like, yeah, we're not concerned about these medicals. We will take him, right? I mean, they waited till the very, very end to take him. So I don't even know if the Steelers are truly believing that knee's okay. They just are taking a flyer on it. But to your point here, if it works and his knee is fine, did you walk away? You walked away with like 2 chances at getting a truly good or borderline great press man corner. Father Dismas says, how do you see Canada's offense changing for this year? No, I don't know that it's going to change a whole lot other than, obviously it's going to be more around Kenny's skill set in structure. And I think I can't tell you what that's going to look like, because where did Kenny look most comfortable in structure last year? Quick game. So could it be a lot of quick game stuff? I mean, you would hope that Kenny would evolve out of that going into 2023. I would hope to see more play action, especially more comfortability with play action if the offensive line gets better. A lot of the time you don't want to run play action because you're worried about, the quarterback turning his eyes to the defense and then we're right on top of you. But I think it's going to be a lot of I think stylistically, though, what we saw at the end of last season is what we're going to see again. You're going to see a lot of 12 personnel. You're going to see a lot of running the football, a lot of zone runs. That's just who the Steelers, I think Canada said it during his press conference after they picked Darnell Washington. We're not hiding who we want to be. So, yeah. Let's see. Tanner says, I saw Penn State play Michigan State last fall. Michigan State didn't throw at JPJ. Jaden Reed went off for almost 100 and didn't do much against JPJ. Yeah, that's pretty much the entirety of Joey Porter Jr. He was a lonely guy out there. They were just not looking his way. And again, I think that tells you why. I think that tells you kind of who the or what other teams in the Big Ten thought of Joey Porter Jr. All right, I know there's a lot of things. Let's see. I'm going to try and look through here for some stuff. We're at an hour. I usually call these after an hour. I'm going to call this one pretty soon. I'm going to try and see if there's any other comments that I need to address here. Yeah, Mr. Wire said about Nick Herbig, he's 6'2", but he has to add weight. Yeah, I mean, you're just not going to be a good edge rusher. And then he says Leal could lose a few pounds to play edge. I did hear, though, that Leal is up to 300 pounds. So that's where I'm like, I want to know what the hell the plan is at that. Mr. Wire says, is the rebuild over? Yes. Yes. The rebuild, well... Is the rebuild over? Great question. What a good question that is. Is the rebuild over? What do you guys think? I mean, I think yes, right? I mean, I think we're now in the window. Is it too early to say we're in the window? Probably a year too early. Probably have one more year before you can say rebuild over. But I would argue right now, after this class, yeah, I mean, I probably want to see them take another inside linebacker just to kind of solidify that. And then rebuild over. Yeah. I mean, we're close. We're close to rebuild over. We're close. Like, this is who. Actually, no. I will say this. No. Rebuild is over. I'll tell you why. Because, and this is why we're writing these things about the Matt Canada, like, you can't screw this up. Because we know who they want to be now. The rebuild is over because now they've kind of identified this is what we're going to be. We're going to be the Zag team. We're going to come in. We're going to be fit in a kind of pass-happy finesse league. We're going to come in. We're going to be the most physical team that you will face on the calendar. You're not, all the kind of cover 2 stuff you see. Throw that shit out the door. We're getting in your face. We're playing press. And on the offensive side, everyone's going to spread you out. Nope, we're getting tight, and we're going to jam it down your friggin' throat. Okay, that's our mentality. And that's why I say rebuild over, because they've kind of stamped that mentality. That's who we're going to be. Now the question is, can they execute on that? That's why I would say the rebuild part of it is over. This team has a true identity going into 23. A true identity. And the question is, can Tomlin, can the coaching staff around these guys in a shape to put that idea on the football field? And with that, I'll wrap this thing up. Appreciate everybody for joining today. What a class. Congrats to Omar Khan for his first draft class. Obviously, draft classes aren't made on draft night. They're made on the football field, and none of these guys have actually seen the field. But you'd be hard-pressed to find a Steeler draft class that you feel better about coming out of it, right, the day after than we do today on this Monday after the NFL draft. So, again, thank you all for watching. I'll be back with more Steeler Country.